at least in the beer groups that I'm in on social media, when the discussion turns to traditional German fest beers, one brand rises to the top as being the gold standard, and that is Ayinger, 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 however you pronounce that one. Hey, welcome to another episode of Chewing the Brew. I'm Matthew, and this is me drinking the Oktober Fest-Märzen by Ayinger Private Brewery from Germany. This is an import. The bottle says it was bottled in June of this year, which is about the time that all the other fest beers I saw were on shelves were bottled. So yay, it's a in-season one at least. And this is actually my second time recording this. I recorded this 2 days ago as well, except I was being chased by hornets the entire video. I was wearing a very bright teal-ish shirt, which was probably telling them I was a flower of some sort, or the beer was attracting them, one of the two. So let's see if take two's any better. It's not cooler today than it was that day, but it's later in the day, so maybe they're sleepy. I don't know. I'm also not wearing that bright teal. Anyways, so fest beers, yeah, super malty. While the original fest beers were pretty strong, actual Märzens, brewed in March and then lagered all year to be drunk at the party. In more recent times, they developed a lighter version of those. Those are fest beers. So there's typically a difference between a fest beer and a Märzen. Märzen. And so I'm not actually sure which one this one falls into because it is a fest beer or a Fest-Märzen. So this might be a traditional Märzen. So yeah, but super malty. We're expecting this to be very malty. Just that's what they are. Fest beers, Märzens, they're very malty, very bready. Minimal hop characteristic. What hops there are would be maybe to the earthier side or maybe just a little pop of color at the tail end, but it's not going to be a prominent characteristic. They are also excellent beers for cooking with. You heard it here. You heard it here 3,000th, folks, because I know I'm not the first one to say that. Oh yeah, definitely. So considering this is also brewed according to the Reinheitsgebot. It actually says right on the label, the German beer purity law. So it is water, barley, hops, and yeast. There's not wheat, there's not rye, there is not rice, there is not corn or any other cereal or non-cereal grain in this beer. It is 100% barley. So the grain I'm smelling should be very much a barley malt. And I think that's an interesting way to explore, okay, what do the different grains bring to beers? And in a relatively mild, lightly roasted, very lightly roasted, 100% barley malt, I'm going to be expecting to be smelling barley. And while it is quite bready, it's also quite sweet to the nose. And in fact, the bread isn't necessarily like a brioche, like a super enriched bread. It's more of a sweet, hearty loaf, a sweet rustic loaf kind of aroma. There's a little bit of green. It's like just way in the back, just a little bit of brightness. It smells good. To someone who really likes hops, this really isn't going to be your mug of beer, and that's fine. Not every beer has to be for everybody. But when you're looking at traditional, building block beers of Western society, here. Yeah. So I have drunk this beer several times on channel, but never in a standalone review. It has always been in the past part of one of my Oktoberfest roundups, which were, funnily enough, the first videos that I released on this channel. I believe I did in 2020 one Oktoberfest beer review where I had like 3 or 4 or 5 different fest beers. And then I believe a year later I recorded a second one, and then I just kept going from there. So, you know, a little bit of year hiatus and then made this channel go. The flavor, while the aroma is bready, the flavor, it stops short of being as sweet. It's like it smells sweeter than it tastes, which is probably a good thing. It's still bready, but it's almost like a, it's more like that rustic loaf, less sweet. There's also a hint of like maybe stewed apple, but once again, not sweet. It's like the essence of apple in there. And there's a kind of an earthy note that runs through it, very, very reminiscent of fields being harvested. Yeah. Which I suppose, considering that, you know, Oktoberfest has kind of essentially turned into a big harvest festival. It was originally a, you know, a wedding feast that became a bit of a tradition. But being as it is late in the year, you know, September, harvest, that's probably why it stuck around. People like to celebrate all the harvest stuff coming in. You know, the fruit of the fields. Everything that you've been working hard to grow all year, it's here now. And one of those things you've been growing was the beer in your vats. The earthy note, this remains a pretty well-balanced beer. I mentioned in one of my more recent reviews about how balance isn't necessarily a set thing, but it's more a case of what flavors do we have and where did we, you know, where did we balance? Sorry, I just saw something in my peripheral, my chicken yard, that made me wonder what was going on. It's not necessarily a set thing. My perspective changes based on what I had for dinner, when I last had a drink, a lot of things. And so when I'm talking about balance, it's more that they take this flavor and then they added another flavor here and another flavor over here that work together to form some cohesive whole that is pleasant in a way. And yes, that's what this is doing. There is that sweetness, though it is tempered a bit in the drinking, and there is this earthy note and this yeah, it's really just, I would say it's just kind of this sweet breadiness and this earthy note, and it works. They work together very nicely. They provide some point and counterpoint and make it a very pleasant beer. This beer is very much intended to be drunk while eating savory foods, sausages, cheeses, rich breads, that kind of stuff. And so, to an extent, it also exists or is intended to exist in a broader balance, right? You have your sweet, bready note here, and you have your strong, rich, fatty, savory sausage over here, and together they make a wonderful party, right? This is a good beer. I have several, well, I have 2 other Oktoberfest beers that I plan to drink, but I wanted to drink my Ayinger first because, like I mentioned at the outset, it is a bit of the gold standard, at least in the US, when it comes to traditional, actual German-made, imported fest beers. And I wanted to explore why that was and refresh my own memory so that as I go into these other beers, I'll have a better idea of how they stand up against how they're supposed to be. Because I have experienced a lot of times in the US, in the local beers, or at least the ones made in the US, brewed in the US, they do tend to be a bit heavier with the hops in particular, just to name one particular common offense. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, just when you're making beer, especially since in the US we tend to enjoy our bright, vibrant hops more so than maybe a more traditional brewing culture. But when you're holding to a standard, or when you're trying to make a beer that is a standard, there's some reason to stick closer to the standard, right? Don't stray too far away. And a lot of the American breweries have, to a greater or lesser extent, done that pretty well. You can go back and watch all my old Beer Fest or Festbier reviews to see the ones that I enjoyed and when, and watch my next few coming out to see how I like them this year. Anyways, this is me, Matthew. I have been drinking and enjoying the Ayinger Oktober Fest-Märzen. This is a Festbier, first of the year, and I'll catch y'all on the flip side. Prost!